Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. As David said, this is the fifth and final of FDA's live retailer training sessions for retailers to discuss the new laws that restrict the sale, distribution, and marketing of tobacco products to make them less accessible and attractive to kids. As retailers, you play an important role in protecting children and adolescents from the risks associated with using tobacco products. Every day, almost 4,000 kids under the age of 18 try their first cigarette, and 1,000 kids under the age of 18 become daily smokers. Many of these kids will become addicted before they're old enough to understand the risks and will ultimately die too young of tobacco-related diseases. As retailers, you are uniquely positioned to help reduce underage access to tobacco products. Our new Director for the Center for Tobacco Products, Dr. Lawrence Deaton, and I believe it is important to work with you all to help you to comply with these new regulations and to protect kids from tobacco use. Now, the agenda for today is, first we're going to talk a little bit about FDA 101. We're going to describe some of the terms that we're going to talk about here readily and give you an opportunity to ask some questions about FDA, because as we're aware, several of you have never been regulated and have never worked with the agency before. Next, we're going to describe the final rule that was published in March and became effective on June 22nd of this year. We're going to break it down into two parts. We're going to talk a little bit about the access provisions. Valerie's going to discuss those provisions, and then I'll discuss the advertising and promotion provisions within this rule. Next, we'll talk about the flavor ban. That's the ban on flavored cigarettes and the sale of those products. Next, we'll talk about the restrictions on light, low, and mild cigarettes and what effect that has on retailers. The next area we'll discuss is the Tobacco Retailer Training Program. And finally, we'll discuss a recent guidance that the agency just issued on civil money penalties and no tobacco sale orders and how they affect retail establishments. Now, who is FDA? Well, FDA is a federal agency within the Department of Health and Human Services that regulates various commodities of products. Now, these include drugs, medical devices, dietary supplements, foods, cosmetics, vaccines, blood, biologics, animal and veterinarian medicines, radiation-emitting products, and most recently, tobacco products. Now, Valerie and I will be discussing these terms frequently during our discussions today. We just wanted to clarify some of these terms to you. Under laws, now these are laws that affect regulated industry. That could be manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, importers, or retailers of tobacco products. Statutes is a law, and the reason why we're here today is to discuss the recent Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, which amended the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Next, we'll also discuss regulations. Now, these are also have the effect of law. They're enforceable by the agency. An example would be the recently issued regulation on access and advertising provisions of cigarettes and smokeless tobacco products. And finally, we're going to be discussing a lot of these documents called guidance documents. Now, what are these kinds of documents? Well, they're not statute and they're not law. They're not enforceable by the agency. It's the agency's current thinking on how you can comply with the different statutory and regulatory provisions. It's a recommendation to regulated industry on how you can comply with those provisions. Now, FDA was granted the authority to regulate tobacco products, as I said, under the recent statute that was passed and signed into law by President Obama on June 22nd, 2009, and it's called the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act. Throughout the day today in our training, we'll be referring to that as the Tobacco Control Act. Now, this new law gave FDA the authority to regulate tobacco products, but also with regard to retailers, it required the agency to reissue the regulation that it had issued back in 1996. That's the Access and Advertising Regulation that affects retailers. And it also requires that the agency contract with all the states and territories where feasible to conduct inspections, compliance check inspections of retail establishments to ensure that retailers are in compliance with the requirements under the regulation.